Hello, Communications 251. I am Zach Howe. Today I'm going to be looking at the importance of visual graphs in report writing. So firstly, what we're going to start off with is what is a visual graph? So looking at it, visual graphs are charts, graphs, tables, or illustrations that present a visual representation of information or numbers being discussed within a report. And they are also an easier way to show the amount or a number value of an item or an object. So example of this is an easier way to show things like change over time, look at parts of a different whole. It just allows writers or report writers an easier way to present numbers without having to try to explain in words. Secondly, looking at it, what are the common types of visual aids that are used in report writing? Well, firstly, we can look at a pie chart, which we see in the top right there, is typically a display sections of a whole, and each of these sections represent a different part. So an example of this can be 3/5 of Canadians use an iPhone. So in a pie chart, you have 3/5 of your whole would be colored in or shaded in for those 3/5 of the Canadians who use an iPhone. The rest then would be sectioned off for the other half that use something else. The second type of graph that we commonly see are bar graphs. These are typically either horizontal or vertical lines that are used to compare specific items. And we see that on the right there, the image right across, that usually we can use these to look at things like temperature change over the last 5 months. So you can see that change over those last 5 months if they're evened out, if there's a higher month or if there's a lower month, things like that. Then we have the next one, which are tables. Tables typically are just looking at numerical values in a very compact system. So you have different rows and columns that each represent a different thing. So as we see in the one at the right there, we have ones that represent the day, the frequency, and the response. And tables can differ depending on the data that is being provided. The last and final type of visual aid that most commonly is used is a line graph. So line graphs are very similar to that of a bar graph, is that they are used to look at change over time, but they're presented in a different manner. Typically they're looked at on a graph sheet, and what they're meant to do is look at trends and relationships between two different numbers or variables. So an example of this commonly is looking at, let's say, decrease in sales or increase in labor. And commonly we can then look at, okay, with sales going down, how much is labor going up? Thirdly, why use visual graphs? Well, visual graphs help provide the audience or your reader with a visual representation of the data. It also allows the writer, such as yourself, an easier way to explain that data without having to go into a very wordy response. So you can really keep your reports concise at the same time. It also offers an easier way to show either a relationship or a pattern based on the data. So if there's something that you notice that you want to make an argument for, then it's an easier way to present that these two ideas relate. So things like sales and labor, or maybe temperature change, anything like that. And also, to kind of the final point, we can draw information quickly for an easier understanding. Because what visual graphs allow us to do is see that visual representation of the data, so we don't get confused with all the words and things going on within it. We can say, oh, there's the data, now we can see what's going on, and we can just start from there. How to use visual aids. So plain and simple, the easiest way to use a visual aid is you want to create a clear title. So you want to make it clear, very easy to understand, and what your graph is going to be about. And each of your axes should be labeled clearly with the correct information being talked about or being shown at that time. Also, you want to keep it easy to understand, avoid clutter. So make it pretty much with numbers that make sense. Don't put too much on there. Try to keep it very limited to what you want to show. Also, have correct information and scales. With scales, you want to make sure, look at your biggest number, look at your smallest number. Don't put too many numbers on there, and don't undervalue what you want to put. At the same time, you have to make sure it makes sense based on your placement. You don't want to put a visual graph right in an area that you're not talking about that data. So when you talk about the data, you want that visual graph to almost come up either beside it, right after it, somewhere so where the reader sees it, they go, oh, there it goes. And lastly, where to use visuals. So the best way to look at where to use them is in reports that contain a lot of numerical data. A couple of these examples: analytic reports, problem analysis reports. Like last week we did the nomophobia problem analysis, and we saw that with all these different numbers, there's not an easy way to word that out. And with a graph, we can visually present that to our readers or to whoever we're presenting it to, allow them to see what we were able to find in our surveys. It goes the same in analytic reports and any type of report writing. If you're dealing with a lot of numbers or a lot of just information that just is really hard to put into words, it allows you to really concise your research right down. It's also pretty much, as I said, where words are unable to describe numerical data being presented. So the question that I have for you guys: how often have you had to use visual graphs in your own experience in university or work? And has it helped you simplify your information you're presenting on? So I'd like to thank you guys for your time. I have my sources on here on the last page. And thank you and have a nice night.